So it's my first job. I'm out in the cornfield detasseling corn. And if you don't know what detasseling corn is, it's the most exciting job ever for teenagers. You know how corn has those big flowery tops? Well, before they get flowery, those tops, to give you a little corn sex ed talk, those tops, the wind would blow and the little seeds would go into the other corn and they make hybrid corn in these particular rows. So we would take all the tops off of the female corn so that the male corn, the seeds would go and would land in the female corn and they would make these hybrid things. So that's about as far into the corn sex ed talk as we're going to get today. But I was one of those people that took the tops off of the corn. Take your thumb, dig as deep down into the top of the corn stalk as you could, rip that thing out. Throw it on the ground. Make sure it made it all the way to the ground. That was my job. Exciting, isn't it? So we're riding this machine that slowly drives across the field. And on about day 4, I had this boss named Dale. And Dale was a guy who all the new kids hated. We just hated him because he was super demanding. He was hard. He was rigid. You did it his way or you were gone. And one day, I was told I was going to be on Dale's crew, and I was, oh crap, Dale's crew. And the first half of the day, he was all over us. We were going to be the first workers laid off, he said. We were lousy. He'd get down in the bucket with us and dig into the corn and would show us over and over how we were supposed to do it, and we'd still mess it up. But then, after lunch that day, something happened. During the course of that day, our little band of misfits, these kids that truly couldn't do anything, for some reason, we came together. And at first, I think it was because we were all just mad at Dale. I couldn't stand that guy. We just hated him. But the funny thing was, Dale then turns into this cheerleader. He told us we were the little crew that could. We were the champions in that field. And I realized then that Dale was just kind of calling it the way he saw it. He was one of the first people I met who truly motivated me to do as well as I could and to push myself. And now, in 2018, imagine Dale trying to be that same motivator over text message, or maybe even on Twitter. Live from the 3-room apartment above Uncle Jack's garage while the basement's being renovated. Hey there, Stackers. I'm Joe Saul-Sehy, Average Joe Money on Twitter. And what an exciting show we have today. We start off with corn, sex education in the cornfield. You're welcome. And then we're not only going to have one, we're going to have 2 headlines that we rip from the financial press. We're not going to just read them. We're going to talk about them. And as if that's not enough, like a cherry on top of this sundae, or the flour on top of the corn stalk, we're going to have what we call the big idea. And that's where we put these 2 pieces together and give you something to take home with. And that's what Money in the Morning is all about. Money in the Morning today is brought to you by Tiller. Tiller's the spreadsheet-based program for you to track your expenses either more easily like I like it or more complicated and convoluted like Mom likes it. Whether you want to track everything or just the basics, Tiller's for you because it's ultimately customizable. StackyBenjamins.com/Tiller for more, and that will tell them that we sent you. Thanks to everybody who has gone there. All right, you've got places to go. We've got a fantastic show for you today. So, Laura, why don't you fire up this podcast?
Who needs coffee when you have Money in the Morning headlines?
Thank you, Laura. Who needs coffee? I still need coffee, I admit. This first piece comes to us from Fortune. Disney offers to pay school tuition for tens of thousands of hourly workers. School tuition. Have you ever seen, by the way, everybody talks about Disney and Disney's employees. Have you seen how much money Disney pays their hourly people? They're not known for paying their hourly people a lot of money. And that's the fascinating thing about Disney is that, well, people that have heard this have heard me wax poetic about Disney a lot of times. But I'll tell you, when it comes to paying people, Disney's not in the ballpark. They are not known for high pay. And yet, their workers go on and on about them and how much they like working there. So let's read. This comes to us, as I said, from Fortune, and it's written by Brittany Shute. Rank and file Walt Disney workers can attend college if they want and send the bill to their boss. Last Tuesday, the entertainment giant announced a new program to fund tuition for 80,000 hourly workers known as Disney Aspire. The program pays tuition up front and will reimburse workers for educational expenses such as application fees and require books and materials. The range of educational options is basically unlimited, including high school equivalency courses, vocational training, English language learning, and bachelor's and master's degree programs. Employees do not have to choose a course of study related to their current job title or their role with Disney. The entertainment giant said it's the most comprehensive program of its kind. Quote, we're constantly looking at ways to help people realize their ambitions and fulfill their dreams, said Jane Parker, Senior Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer at Disney, in a blog post. The program is the latest in that effort. The Disney program will be administered by Guild Education, a Denver-based company that administers educational benefit programs for workers at companies, including Walmart and Lyft. In July, after months of union pressure, Disney gave some park workers a pay raise, bumping its minimum wage to $15. So the union has to pressure Disney to raise minimum wage to $15, and then Disney goes and gives this huge benefit of paid-for education programs, everything from high school equivalency courses to anything that has to do with higher education. Doesn't even have to be in your field of expertise. It's interesting when you look at this, because there are two things going on here. I think number one is most of us think, well, Disney, they're going to pay a lot for that. What do you get out of that? You get a ton. If you're an employer, have you ever looked at the amount of money it costs to bring a new employee into your organization and also to bring that person up to speed versus training correctly a current employee? The cost of keeping a current employee happy versus hiring somebody new, it's amazing how night and day it is. And yet, I've worked at businesses where a lot of the people around me had this wonderful idea of, hey, I'm not going to train them. If they don't work out, I'm going to fire them. I'm going to hire somebody else. And it's funny because on one hand, what a crappy workplace environment when you know your boss is just going to can you because they're going to fire you for something they didn't really teach you to do in the first place. And on the other hand, how brilliant is it to know that you've got this company that has your back that is actually going to let you educate yourself, create your own training program, whether it has to do with what you're doing for Disney right now or not. In fact, it's funny. You see this difference between managers who try to keep the employees down, right? They want everybody to stand in line, and the enlightened managers who spend a lot of time helping their employees build their resume. And you know, historically, by the way, who's had employees who stay with the boss the longest? Not the one that keeps people down. Those people take off. It's the one who helps their employees leave. The one who helps them leave actually has people that stay longer. And it's phenomenal. It isn't the way you think it would be. But that's like a lot of life, isn't it? I mean, when you take a look at your budget as an example, do you know statistically people that give more money, give a higher percentage of their money, actually end up with bigger raises, having more connections, and having more money? It's pretty amazing. And I know also that sometimes you can't give money, but people that are givers tend to also get more. And it goes back to a big idea from about a week ago that we're going to call the little idea today for this one. And that is think long-term and not so obvious. A lot of people think short-term and obvious, man. I'm going to pay my workers less, not going to give them any perks. Disney certainly is on the pay the worker less. $15 an hour is not a phenomenal amount. They had to be pressured by the union to do that. And then the long-term and not so obvious, huge education program. Way to go, Disney. Let's say hello to our friends that are hanging out with us on Facebook today. We do these in front of a live Facebook audience who sometimes chimes in on what we're talking about today. A lot of chiming in but not much chiming in today on what we're talking about. Sharon's here today. Kimberly's here. I'm headed for Bavaria, and she asks what they call Bavarian cream donuts in Bavaria. I'm about to find out, Kimberly. Who knows? Ryan is here. We actually said hello to Sharon earlier. Now, Ryan's listening at work, and he has a woman named Sharon who walked by, and I said, hey, Sharon's here. Hey, Sharon. And it kind of surprised him that I'm omniscient. I actually wasn't talking about the Sharon who's with us online today on Facebook watching Ryan. I was actually talking about the one at your desk. I have a little camera there, and I get to hang out with Ryan every day. And Sophia's here. Jamie's also here. Jamie asked us if we're all set in Detroit. We are all set in Detroit. For those of you wondering what the heck Jamie's talking about, we're taking the show on tour. StackyBenjamins.com/tour. Sophia says she needs coffee. Yes, she absolutely does. And Kimberly says benefits are technically part of your pay. And they are. So let me tell you one organization, Kimberly, as an example kind of not short-term and obvious versus long-term and not so obvious. There's an organization I know very well here in town, here in Texarkana. And in this organization, they stripped away the holiday party. They took away a bunch of the benefits. They used to give benefits to the workers in several different areas. They took those away and instead gave the people more pay. And what's funny is that when you look at the turnover and I don't know the esprit de corps, how motivated people were, even though people got the equivalent in their paycheck of dollars, taking away those benefits that look like they cared, actually has been a big negative. It's been a huge negative. And what's funny is the average person coming out of college doesn't know the difference between $42,000 and $44,000, let's say, or $45,000, whatever the cost of those benefits are. Stripped out the benefits, gave it to them in their paycheck, said, we're not dealing with it anymore. You deal with it. Thought that the workers would be happier that way. Horrible idea. Absolutely horrible idea. And all the workers in this particular place here in town, not all of them, but a lot of them, you can tell they don't really think their employer cares. They don't act like they care. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Ryan is here and says we need to bring the show to Indy. I'd love to come to Indy. You know what we are going to do at the very least, Ryan? We have friends, of course, Pete the Planner, our friend Pete the Planner's in Indy. And if we don't do a show there, we are going to definitely do a meetup there. But I'll say this, the whole future of us doing shows is, and not to put any more pressure on myself than there already is, but this 3-city tour is really kind of a guide of whether we do this again in the future. It is way harder to set this thing up than I thought it was going to be. It's a blast, but it's been very difficult. But I love Indianapolis. For those of you, by the way, that haven't been to Indy, you got to go. The Broad Ripple area, so fun. Downtown, incredible. I like there's a hotel downtown that we stayed at that has railroad cars on the inside. It's neat. It's a hotel plus, I don't know, it's like a museum feel. It's a neat place. Downtown. I used Hotwire to stay there, by the way. That's when I first learned about Hotwire. And if you have never used Hotwire before, it's amazing. I have no affiliation with this company, but I remember walking out of my room. We were there for a swim meet with my kids. And speaking of saving money, or at that time, spending money, I think my room was about $100, $110, which I still thought was inexpensive for a nice hotel room in a downtown area like Indianapolis. Anyway, my friend Paul comes out of the room next to me, where he's at with his family. He comes out and he goes, hey, what'd you spend on your room? And I said, I don't remember the actual number, but it was like $110. He goes, oh, I paid $55. Really? How'd you do that? Hotwire. I've never found a hotel room cheaper than Hotwire. Now, the bad news is that with Hotwire, and I didn't mean to get off on this tangent, but with Hotwire, it's hard to specify the number of beds. If you're traveling with a bigger family, or like when my daughter and I were traveling, and then we go into a hotel and there's just the one bed. That happened one time, and luckily we could change our rooms. But if you want to specify the number of beds, Hotwire is very difficult to do that way. But traveling alone, great spot. All right. That's I got to talk to Hotwire about sponsoring this show after all that. Diane's here. Diane says, treat people well. They will help your company. People are either loyal or they'll undercut your business subtly. And they do undercut it, don't they? Like you can tell when people aren't happy in the business they work in. Like you walk up to the counter and man, can you tell? It is and yet owners miss it. Just they're so busy counting dollars and cents, they don't think about the people cost. Great point, Diane. Let's move on to our second piece here, which comes to us from NAPA-Net. That's the National Association of Plan Advisors, the people that manage 401k plans, pension plans, that sort of thing. Millennials, unexpected retirement savings, and advice preferences. Man, we see study after study on millennials, don't we? And they all point to millennials save a lot of money. They don't invest a lot of money, though. They prefer electronics. You see those statistics. Let's see what this latest one says, written by Ted Godbout. Despite assumptions that millennials are not focused on saving for retirement, a new study uncovers unexpected wealth management trends among the generational cohort. According to a national study conducted by the Center for Generational Kinetics on behalf of Broadridge Financial Solutions, a large majority of millennials say they're actively saving and prefer more regular communication with financial advisors, even though most admit they're not working with one. In fact, 2/3 of millennials surveyed report that they're actively saving for retirement, while nearly 70% of respondents acknowledge they're not currently working with an advisor. Quote, millennials are open to receiving investment advice and planning for retirement, notes Cindy Dash, head of Broadridge's Matrix Financial Solutions. The results of the study show a clear opportunity for financial advisors to utilize technology-enabled solutions to better educate and communicate with all generations, including millennials. Notwithstanding the perception that millennials operate strictly in a digital world, the findings show that this group finds in-person meetings and phone calls to be the best way to build trust with a financial advisor. Only 70% of millennials view texting and only 9% view social media as trust-building communications. In addition, 67% of millennial respondents prefer communication from a financial advisor at least monthly, while 28% prefer contact on a daily or weekly basis. Of the survey respondents, 55% indicated they'd consider or use their parents' financial advisor, but only 1 in 5 millennials whose parents have a financial advisor have actually met their parents' advisor. Broadridge notes that millennials are the only generation found to trust retirement advice from family and friends more than advice from a financial professional or advisor. When asked about preferred financial advisor traits, millennials say their first priority is experience, albeit less so than older respondents. Compared to older generations, millennials are more likely to seek advice from a professional who has similar demographic qualities as themselves, such as gender, socioeconomic status, and financial history. And the piece goes on, but I really want to stop there. I think that's what we're going for on today's piece. Millennials and financial advisors. Millennials say they like financial advisors, maybe want to work with financial advisors. They're open to working with their parents' financial advisor, but they've never met their parents' financial advisor. By the way, shame on the advisor for letting that happen, because intergenerational planning is a big part of planning. Even if the advisor doesn't end up working with the kids, knowing that the whole family is kind of up on what's going on with mom and dad's stuff makes it much, much easier for the financial plan to continue and for legacies and families to be built. And it also, the communication builds stronger relationships overall now, and also makes things easier as parents get older. And it's so important, and yet so many families don't do it. I remember when I walked into the room, when I was a kid, I'd walk into the room and my parents, nope, turn around, we're talking about money. Think about having those conversations with your kids in the room. If they're difficult conversations, you don't want to scare your children, especially younger children. But at some point, involve them in some of the meetings. Maybe the aspirational meetings, the ones that are about saving, the ones that are about having more money as a family, about goal setting, reaching your goals, or maybe even about paying the bills, assuming that there's enough money to pay the bills, talking about the bills and actually looking at how much different things cost. I think that intergenerational planning is super important. And sadly, when they talk about millennials, right, we're not talking about little kids anymore. We're now talking about people that are out on their own, like my kids are, and open to working with financial advisors. Now, this piece about wanting to meet with financial advisors daily or weekly, the sad thing is the economics of a financial advisory model, and for them to make the best use of their time, because don't forget that the financial advisor also needs to stay in business. Like, the best thing for you, if you have a financial advisor, is for them to stay in business. And thinking that they're going to call you every day, or they're going to call you once a week, you better be willing to pay them a lot of money, because where is their check going to come from for them to stay in business? So economics don't support what they want there. But that's interesting, because advisors can actually communicate in different ways. I love this idea of face-to-face meetings, and I love the idea of phone calls. And it's funny, because you kind of think in this age of social media, like, that's all lost. And yet even millennials, who are very used to those brands of communication, want to have face-to-face meetings. They want to talk on the phone to each other. That's how you build trust. I got to tell you, I go to only 2 or 3 conferences a year, but those face-to-face conferences, when I can be in the same room with somebody and look at them in the eye, it's so important. And if you're not going to conferences for whatever your thing is, I think you're really missing out. I think you're missing some big opportunities to build some bridges, and ultimately, maybe, whatever your goal is, to be better at your profession or drive revenue, wherever it might be. I think that's pretty important. So I get excited about this. I think it's an awesome opportunity for millennials. I think it's a great opportunity for advisors to talk together. But the way advisors are thinking, millennials only want to talk via electronics. Millennials are saying, nope, I like the old way. We seem to have a little bit of a disconnect. But I think that'll be solved. And there's the other frustration, the elephant in the room, which is how most financial advisors get paid. Because most financial advisors get paid, and I'm wondering if I get on the step stool or not, but most financial advisors prefer to be paid a percentage of assets. And as long as that's the case, until millennials have lined their pockets with money and advisors can have tons of assets under management, once again, back to the economics of it, millennials are going to get the short end of that stick. Because advisors are always going to go to where the money is. I mean, it really stinks. When I started my career, I worked with a lot of younger people, because that's who would talk to me. I was a younger guy. Younger people would talk to me. As I became a more seasoned advisor, you realized it was just about as much effort to work with somebody with $1 million as it was to work with somebody with $30,000. And if I'm charging a percentage, I'm making a ton, and not a little more money, I'm making a ton of money per hour more. And sadly, what ends up happening when advisors charge that way, the people that need your help the worst, the least in a lot of ways, those people end up getting your help. Don't get me wrong, some of those more complex problems as the wealth gets bigger are really some of the more thrilling things to do as advisors. Some of the complex estate planning. We have a guy coming on tomorrow on the Stacky Benjamin show talking about life insurance as a savings vehicle. All the Dave Ramsey people just had a heart attack and died. Either that or the pitchforks are out. But seriously, this isn't Dave Ramsey's audience now anymore. He's not talking to multimillionaires. But for people with the right amount of money, stuffing a life insurance policy full of cash after everything else is full can be a huge win, only for the right person. And I rarely saw insurance used that way. But that can be a big win. Anyway, back to the problem. The problem is advisors. If you're a millennial listening to this, I think you need to make sure you look for an advisor who also has a fee structure that supports you growing your wealth instead of just maintaining your wealth. I think a lot of advisors are in the maintaining wealth business, and that's fine. I mean, I'll give you a great example. Our friend Roger Whitney works with older people, and he specifically says he works with older people. That's not somebody that a millennial wants to work with today. That's not who Roger really wants as clients. So pick the right advisor. Good stuff there. Let's say hi. We've had some chatter out here. Ben says, can I ask Doug to come out of the closet behind me? How do you know that we stuff Doug in the closet? Ben's on to us, Richie. Ben knows. Yeah, he's not coming out. Chris says, I'll be glad when article summaries start diving into other variables for why people aren't having certain money habits than just those millennials. Gosh, we're missing out on a lot of insight with money habits when we only look at the year people are born. Totally agree with that, Chris. I think we're so in love with these categorizations. You just saw live. I can't pronounce that word. We're in love with these categories, Chris. We're so in love with these that we put people in these little boxes. You know, it's almost like racial stereotypes, right? Age stereotypes, racial stereotypes. We want to put people, gender stereotypes. We want to put people in a little box. And I'm with you. I think the fabric gets more interesting when it's more like a quilt. And we look at people in different ways. Great comment. Steven's here. Steven says, I was told by my parents' financial advisor I was ready to go it on my own. After asking about fees on the mutual fund he initially set me up with. I think I asked him about low-cost ETF funds. Wait a minute, Steven. So let me get this straight. You asked about the fee and asked him if there was something lower cost, and he booted you to the curb, which I think is the story you're telling, which I also think tells me everything I need to know about that financial advisor. That's so amazing. Dylan's here. Oh boy, Dylan's here. Whether you're doing your investing yourself or have an advisor, make sure you at least learn the basics to understand what's going on. Dylan, as you know, I totally believe that. When I was an advisor, I was an awfully good one. And like as we started the show here, I was very much like a Dale who motivated me with my clients. I could be the gruff guy that told you you're not doing enough. I could be the cheerleader. Either way, I was the guy on your team. But here's the deal. It was your team. It wasn't my team. And the people I worked worst with are people that wanted to abdicate and hand it over to me and then yell at me when things didn't go right. It's your money. It's not my money. And I think, and you can hear in my voice how I'm really getting on the step stool now, if you're somebody who really is looking for a great relationship with an advisor, treat them like an advisor. Like, think about the definition of the term advisor. This person should be your agent. They should be your coach. And if they get hit by a bus, hopefully there's a string of lessons they've taught you before that you can glean from for the rest of your life. If you break up with your advisor and you learn nothing from that experience, I think the advisor did it wrong. I think you chose the wrong one. I think it's time to regroup. So advisors should make you smarter investors, should be able to help you take out the colander and sift, just keep the good stuff and sift away all the rest of it. Chris says, the digital divide, access to broadband, good education, probably has more to do with it. Oh, that's a whole different podcast, Chris. But I'm there with you. Deanna says, are you sure OG didn't die? OG didn't die. He's here. You'll hear him on the Stacky Benjamin show. This is just, we boot OG to the curb for this one, Deanna. Every once in a while, we'll let him on Money in the Morning. Actually, I don't think, have we ever had him on Money in the Morning? Maybe one episode. Dylan says, as someone who designs banks and wealth management offices, most still prefer face-to-face interactions for the big decisions. The higher the net worth, typically more often the meetings, even if just checking in. Typically after a certain net worth, though, they want the advisor to come to them to save time. Dylan hits it on the head. I had 2 clients that I went to, and they were my highest net worth clients. And by the way, when I go to other people and they weren't my highest net worth clients, I made that mistake on just a couple occasions. It was horrible. We never got anything done. It was usually better to go to my office, sit in a conference room at a round table, decide what the strategy is, what we're going to do. Maybe I go to the whiteboard and I explain how different concepts work that we're probably thinking about using or why I think a certain way. So a little bit of a teaching session there. We'd come out with a to-do list. I'd have mine. They'd have theirs. I'd follow up a couple weeks later to make sure they'd taken care of theirs and to report it on mine. That's the way the meeting worked for 99% of my clients. If we went to their house, the dog's barking, the phone's ringing, They're worried about other stuff. Oh, just a second, I'll be right back. We can never get into the concepts. I love the idea of getting it done. And yet, my highest net worth people, very quick movers, most interested in getting stuff done. The phone never rang. They were there. They just needed to move directly into the meeting and directly out of the meeting succinctly. It was amazing watching these people work. So I'm completely with you. Kimberly says, I think financial planners willing to go to the client would be very helpful. Going to a meeting isn't my preferred way to use PTO. See, I disagree with that, Kimberly. As I just mentioned, for most people, go to their office, get away from your home environment, get the job done. I find that if you go to the advisor's office, I don't know, man, I wasn't selling vacuum cleaners, right? I'm not going door to door selling vacuum cleaners. It just, we're here to get your stuff done. And the frustrating thing was, I never found that to be the case, except in my two most wealthy clients. Those people could handle it. Most people had other crap going on. Drove me crazy. Plus the amount of time it spent for me, your professional that you want in front of your stuff, looking at your stuff. Instead, I'm on the road driving from house to house all day. Very inefficient. Not the advisor I think that you really want. Deanna puts it very succinctly as a CPA. Says, I don't have my tools at your house. Yeah, and there's also that too, which is a great point. Hey, just a second, we're going to go to the big idea. You guys got feisty there at the halfway point. Nothing about Disney, and then all of a sudden, bam, everybody comes out of the woodwork. Nice job. Great comments. We're going to have the big idea here in just a second, though. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about this miracle we call Tiller. Not only are they the sponsor of this podcast, they also are my preferred way of tracking my expenses and also my preferred way of setting up my budget. And those, by the way, are two different things. So when you're budgeting, you're setting up, here's where we want to be, and here's where we really are. And if you caught either the Stacking Benjamin show with Peter Polson, the CEO of Tiller, or if you caught our video with them, and if you just go back into the video channel where you're watching this and put in Tiller, you'll see Peter going through on video there, but on audio on the Stacking Benjamin show describing this, how you can choose a template where you set up your budget, and then as you press the button and things automatically download from your bank securely into your Tiller plan, which is all set up on either a Google Doc, a Google Sheet rather, or into an Excel spreadsheet, depending on which one you like better and the one that you set up. It automatically changes how much money you have left at the end of the month. You could set yourself, you can set your own alerts. You can have as many pie charts as you want. It can be as complicated as you want. Mom likes it complicated. She likes charts, graphs. She likes data. Me, I love the data, but I find I spend too much time with tons and tons of minutia. Don't have time to do that. Instead, I want to know very quickly where I'm at. And so with Tiller, you can do it either way, either lots of information or a little. And if you don't like the templates they give you, because it's based on a Google Sheet or on Excel, you can change it. stackingbenjamins.com/Tiller gets you there. And by the way, if you use our link, that supports the show. The way that we work on Money in the Morning is they give us a thank you for sending you their way. So if you decide to try it and you use our link, you also support the show. So thanks to everybody who's done that. All right, let's chat a second then here at the end of the show about our big idea. My favorite part of the show is the big idea. How am I going to take this Disney idea of giving college or maybe a high school education to their employees, and not even an education that matters for their job right now, and this idea of millennials and beginning to work with advisors? And that's this. I think the big takeaway here from both of these, the big idea that binds these two, is this value of education in general. And not only a value of education on your career, you know what education can do for your career. You get the college diploma, you get the MBA, you get the PhD, whatever the degree is. In a lot of cases, that degree gives you a bump up. But not only that bump up that's the easy bump just by having the letters behind your name, the education of life lessons that you didn't have to have yourself, the education of reading, even sometimes reading fiction is an education. This value of being in different situations, seeing how different people work, understanding the cube. And by the cube, I mean this. I talked about Dale earlier in the cornfields. Another great mentor I had said that life is like a cube. And whenever you have a discussion with somebody, they're on one side of the cube and you're on the other. And the quicker you can see their side of the cube and understand their way of thinking, the better that conversation's going to go. And the more in probably both of your favor that discussion's going to go. Seek to understand the other side of the cube. And to do that, it takes education. And hooray to companies like Disney, because what Disney knows is not only does that create a happier employee, it creates a more educated employee, which means smarter employee, which means taking care of their guest more. Take care of the people around you, and you get taken care of too. I think it's incredibly powerful. And I think that if financial advisors seek to give people more of an education, financial advisors working with families, parents working with their kids, millennials working with advisors, Disney with their employees, it's all the same. Education, I think, for the win. That's our big takeaway today. Thanks, everybody, for playing on Facebook. Great discussion, by the way, today on Facebook from our Facebook live studio audience. Thanks to everybody listening at home. By the way, another great review that we're putting on Mom's Fridge. I'm going to pull this up very quickly. I just thought about this. This one made me laugh. And Mom made Mom laugh too. This one is by Miss LaCar. Great podcast, 5 stars. I'm enjoying listening to this podcast. Listen to what Miss LaCar says. Without OG as a co-host stealing the show, Joe appears smarter. LOL, she says. Just kidding. But just like Joe's other show, Stacking Benjamins, this is a great finance current events podcast that's digestible and relatable. Good job, Joe. Thanks for making me smile, Miss LaCar. That was very funny. Very funny. I actually look smart. Who knew that I could look smart? All right, guys, go stack some Benjamins. We'll see you back here next time at Money in the Morning.
Money in the Morning is created by Joe Saul-Sehy and comes to your ears because of the collective genius of our producer, Richie Rutter-Reese, engineer, Caden Thompson, and a pack of very well-trained ferrets here in the basement. You'll find links to all of our headlines featured on today's show in Joe's Twitter feed at @AverageJoeMoney. I know you already know this too, but Money in the Morning is for entertainment purposes only, and you shouldn't act on anything recommended by a bunch of entertainers in a basement without first consulting with your financial advisor and second, having your head examined. Have a headline you'd like us to discuss? Send them to Joe at stackingbenjamins.com or put them on our Stacking Benjamins Basement closed Facebook group. This show is copyright 2018 Stacking Benjamins LLC, all rights reserved. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor Doug, and I reserve the right to always say, we'll see you next time back here on Money in the Morning.